Take that thing down! It ruins the look of the neighborhood. Those were the exact words Karen, our HOA president, screamed across my lawn the very first day I came home with my wheelchair ramp. She didn't even wait for me to get out of the van. She marched across the street, clipboard in hand, blonde hair perfectly styled, dressed in her shocking pink blazer and skirt like she was heading into a courtroom instead of terrorizing her neighbors. Her finger jabbed at the ramp installers like they were criminals. Before I go further, make sure to like, subscribe, and share, because what started as a simple home modification for accessibility turned into one of the ugliest HOA battles you can imagine. Here's the backstory. My name's David. 6 months before all this, I was in a car accident that left me with permanent mobility issues. A wheelchair became part of my life overnight. Adjusting to that reality was already hard enough, but I was determined not to let it steal everything from me. My home was supposed to be my safe place, the one corner of the world where I could still feel independent. But there was one problem. My front porch had 3 steep steps. For weeks, my wife had to help me in and out of the house every single time. Groceries, doctor appointments, even just sitting outside for fresh air, it all required help. That's why we saved up to install a proper wheelchair ramp. It wasn't fancy. Just a sturdy, well-built wooden ramp leading up to the porch, painted to match the trim of the house. Functional, safe, and finally, a way for me to move in and out on my own. I can't describe the relief I felt watching the workers put the final touches on it. For the first time in months, I had a glimpse of independence again. I thought maybe, just maybe, life was starting to settle into a new kind of normal, but Karen saw it differently. She stormed up as the crew packed their tools. "You can't just throw this monstrosity on your house!" she barked, waving her clipboard. "This neighborhood has rules. Uniformity matters here." I was stunned. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm, "this isn't about landscaping or paint colors. This is a wheelchair ramp. I need it." Her lip curled like I'd said something disgusting. "Need it or not, it violates the aesthetic guidelines. Front-facing ramps are unsightly. You'll need to remove it immediately and find another option, something less visible." My wife, standing on the porch, stepped in. "Are you serious?" "My husband can't get into his own home without this ramp." Karen didn't flinch. She tapped her clipboard. "Rules are rules. If I let you do this, what's next? Someone building a shed? Someone painting their shutters purple? The neighborhood will look like a circus." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her how humiliating it already was to depend on others for everything. How this ramp wasn't just wood and nails, it was dignity. But the words caught in my throat. All I could manage was, "I'm not taking it down." Her eyes narrowed, cold and sharp. "Then you'll be fined. $500 a week until it's removed. First notice will be on your door tomorrow." And she meant it. The next morning, the letter was there. Plain white envelope, HOA letterhead, bold red font across the page, violation of HOA guidelines, unapproved structure. Fine, $500 weekly. I felt my stomach twist as I read it. $500 a week? We couldn't afford that. Not with medical bills piling up, not with the cost of therapy and adaptive equipment. But what choice did I have? Without that ramp, I was a prisoner inside my own home. That night I sat at the kitchen table staring at the violation notice while my wife made tea. "We can't pay this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "She'll bury us." I clenched the paper in my fist, anger burning in my chest. "She thinks this is about rules," I said. "But it's not. This is discrimination." I didn't know it yet, but that single thought, discrimination, was about to shape everything that followed, because Karen wasn't just picking a fight with me. She was picking a fight with the law, and when the second notice arrived a week later, doubling the fine and threatening a lien on my home, I knew this battle was only beginning. The second notice landed exactly 7 days later, right on schedule, taped to my front door like a scarlet letter. This time it was worse. Not only had the fine doubled to $1,000, but the wording was colder, harsher. It warned that continued violation may result in legal action, property liens, or foreclosure proceedings. I sat there in my wheelchair on the porch, the paper shaking in my hands. Foreclosure. They were threatening to take my home, my family's only refuge, over a wooden ramp. That evening, as I showed the letter to my wife, Karen appeared again. She didn't even bother to knock. She just strutted up the walkway, clipboard hugged to her chest like a weapon. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, her shocking pink blazer glowing in the porch light. "You got the notice," she said smugly. "Good. Maybe now you'll understand this neighborhood isn't about exceptions. Everyone follows the rules." I looked her dead in the eye. "This isn't a garden gnome or a paint color. This is my lifeline. You're fining me for needing accessibility," she laughed. An actual laugh. "Accessibility? Don't be dramatic. You could have built it in the back, out of sight, or hired someone to help you. Instead, you chose to put it right out front, like a billboard. It lowers property values." My wife's fists clenched, but I raised a hand to stop her. "Karen, you're breaking the law." Her smirk widened. "The law doesn't run this neighborhood. The HOA does, and I do." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me gripping the wheels of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment escalated. Karen started making her rounds more frequently, snapping photos of the ramp at all hours. Neighbors who once waved at us suddenly avoided eye contact. One even crossed the street to avoid passing by, afraid she'd be seen associating. Karen had told everyone my ramp was an unapproved eyesore and warned them that if they supported me, they could face violations too. It worked. The silence from most of the block was deafening. Then came the third notice. This one not just from Karen, but signed by the entire HOA board. It gave me 7 days to remove the ramp or face legal proceedings. 7 days to dismantle the one thing that gave me back a shred of independence. My wife cried that night, sitting at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. "We can't keep fighting this," she whispered. "The medical bills, the therapy, now this. David, we'll lose everything." I wheeled closer, placed the notice in front of her, and shook my head. "If we give in, we lose more than money. We lose our dignity, and she'll know she can bully us forever." It was then I realized this wasn't just an HOA dispute, it was something bigger. Karen wasn't just a bully with a clipboard. What she was doing was discrimination, plain and simple. And if she thought I was going to roll over, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The next morning, I started making calls. I reached out to a local attorney who specialized in disability rights. I explained everything, the fines, the threats, the notices. He listened quietly, then finally said, "Mr. Reynolds, what your HOA is doing isn't just wrong. It's illegal. They're violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. You have grounds for a federal complaint." For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. That night, as I sat by the window watching Karen pace in front of my yard with her clipboard, I didn't feel powerless anymore. She thought she was tightening the noose. But what she didn't know was that every photo she snapped, every letter she taped to my door, every smirk she threw my way, it was all becoming evidence. The clock was ticking. 7 days until her deadline. 7 days until the showdown. And when I filed that federal complaint, Karen would learn that no HOA president, not even her, stood above the law. The following Monday, I met my attorney Mark in his downtown office. He was sharp, direct, and didn't waste time sugarcoating. After reading through the stack of violation notices I had collected, he looked at me across the desk and said, "David, this isn't just an HOA overreach. This is discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the fines, completely unenforceable. We'll fight this." Those words lit something inside me. For the first time since the accident, I didn't feel like the victim in someone else's game. I felt like I had a weapon of my own. We filed the federal complaint the next day. Mark also sent a cease and desist letter directly to the HOA board, demanding that all fines stop immediately and warning them of the legal consequences of targeting a disabled resident. But Karen wasn't the type to back down gracefully. No, she doubled down. That week she prowled the neighborhood more aggressively than ever. I saw her outside after dark, phone camera flashing as she took close-ups of the ramp from every angle. She left more letters on my door, scribbled in red ink like some kind of threat. "Remove it now or face consequences." One night around 11 p.m., I heard something at the front of the house. When I rolled to the window, there she was, standing in my yard. Flashlight beam crawling across the wood of the ramp, as if she was looking for evidence. My wife pulled the curtain aside and shouted, "Get off our property!" Karen just smirked, muttered something about unsafe construction, and walked away without a hint of shame. Every time I thought she couldn't sink lower, she found a way. The harassment reached its peak at the next HOA meeting. Normally, those gatherings were dull affairs, budget updates, landscaping notes, the usual. But this one, it was packed. Word had spread about the federal complaint, and the room buzzed with tension as neighbors filed in. Some avoided me, others whispered their support, but everyone knew this was about more than a ramp. Karen took her seat at the head of the table, clipboard in hand like a queen holding her scepter. She cleared her throat dramatically and said, "First order of business, Mr. Reynolds' unauthorized structure." All eyes turned to me. I wheeled forward, calm but ready. Mark, my attorney, sat beside me with a thick folder of documents. Karen started in on her speech. "This ramp violates Section 14.3 of our guidelines. It damages the uniform appearance of our community and sets a dangerous precedent. If he's allowed to keep it, what's next? Garages turned into workshops? Satellite dishes cluttering rooftops? We must preserve our standards." Her words dripped with authority. But I noticed something new this time. Some neighbors weren't nodding along. They were frowning, arms crossed, uncomfortable. When she finally finished, Mark stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This board, and especially you, Ms. Hart, are in violation of federal law. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act, residents with disabilities are entitled to reasonable modifications to their property. That includes wheelchair ramps. By issuing fines and threatening foreclosure, you've exposed this HOA to federal penalties that far outweigh any imaginary harm you claim this ramp has caused. Karen's face went red, but Mark wasn't done. He held up a copy of the complaint. "This has already been filed. The Department of Housing and Urban Development is reviewing it as we speak. And every notice, every photo, every midnight inspection, we have it all documented. This isn't enforcement. This is harassment," the room erupted. Neighbors whispered, some even clapped softly. Karen slammed her clipboard on the table. "Lies! He's twisting everything. The ramp is ugly, unsafe, and lowers property values. We can't have this!" But her voice cracked on the last word. She knew she was losing control. That's when one of the board members, a man who had always stayed quiet in the background, finally spoke. "Karen, enough! This has gone too far. We're not risking federal lawsuits because you don't like the look of a ramp." Karen's jaw dropped. For the first time, she had been openly challenged in her own domain. I looked around the room and saw it. The shift. Neighbors weren't afraid anymore. They were angry. Angry at the fines, the harassment, the endless rules. Karen had poked the wrong bear, and now the whole block was watching her unravel. Still, I knew this battle wasn't finished. Karen wasn't the type to surrender quietly, and sure enough, the very next day, as I rolled down my ramp to fetch the morning paper, a local news van pulled up to the curb. The reporter stepped out with a microphone, smiling. "Mr. Reynolds, we'd like to talk about your fight with the HOA. Karen thought she was waging war on me, but now the entire city was about to see the truth." The news van parked at the end of my driveway like a signal flare. Neighbors peeked through their blinds, some stepping onto porches as the crew began unloading their gear. For a moment, I sat frozen in my chair on the porch, watching as the reporter, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp eyes and a microphone in hand, walked toward me. "Mr. Reynolds?" she asked, her voice crisp but kind. "We've heard about the fines, the threats, the federal complaint. We'd like to hear your story." Karen must have heard the commotion, because within seconds, her front door slammed across the street. Out she came, clipboard clutched tight, shocking pink blazer almost glowing under the morning sun, blonde hair pulled into a perfect knot. She stormed across the asphalt like she owned it. "You can't talk to him," she snapped at the reporter. "This is private HOA business. It's not for the media." The reporter raised a brow. "Ma'am, we're standing on a public street, and Mr. Reynolds has already agreed to speak with us." Karen's jaw tightened. She jabbed a finger at me. "He's lying to you. He's making a spectacle out of nothing. That ramp violates our community standards, and we're enforcing the rules fairly. That's all." But the reporter didn't bite. She turned her mic back to me. "Tell us, David, what does this ramp mean to you?" I swallowed hard, then spoke into the mic, my voice steady. It means freedom, independence, the ability to leave my house without begging someone to carry me down the stairs. It's not an accessory, it's a necessity. And instead of supporting that, my HOA president is fining me, harassing me, threatening foreclosure, because she says a ramp doesn't look uniform. The cameraman zoomed in on the violation notices I held up, each one stamped with bold red letters, each one proof of Karen's obsession. The reporter nodded gravely, then turned back toward Karen. "Ma'am, are you saying this man should not have a wheelchair ramp?" Karen's face twisted. "Don't you spin this. He could have put it in the back. Or hired help. But no, he put it front and center to make this neighborhood look like some rehab facility. It lowers property values. It's selfish." The reporter didn't even have to respond. Gasps rose from the neighbors gathered nearby. Someone muttered, "Did she really just say that?" Another whispered, "Unbelievable." For the first time, Karen wasn't holding the floor. She was exposing herself. The segment aired that evening. Local channel primetime news. My story played over images of me using the ramp, of Karen screaming in her pink blazer, of neighbors watching from porches with disgust. The anchor closed the piece with a line that still gives me chills. Is preserving uniformity worth stripping a man of his independence? That's the question residents here are now asking. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Old friends, distant relatives, even strangers sent messages of support. Disability advocacy groups reached out, offering help. Neighbors who had once been silent came knocking, bringing casseroles, coffee, and quiet apologies. "We should have stood up sooner," one man admitted. "She scared all of us, and then something amazing happened. That weekend, families up and down the street started building. Ramps, small and symbolic, popped up on porches, even at houses that didn't need them. One neighbor set out a handmade sign that read, "Accessibility is not negotiable." By Sunday night, our block looked less like Karen's idea of uniform perfection and more like a community united. Karen, of course, was livid. She marched door to door, clipboard in hand, threatening fines. But people slammed doors in her face. Others filmed her, posting videos online with captions like "HOA Grinch still at it." Every clip went viral. The internet dubbed her Ramp Karen. Memes of her in her pink blazer, screaming about property values, spread faster than she could tape up notices. The pressure mounted. HUD officials called to schedule interviews with me. The State Housing Authority sent letters demanding explanations from the HOA. Even city council members weighed in publicly, condemning discrimination in housing. The board members who once sat silent beside Karen now avoided her calls. The walls were closing in, and yet she still wouldn't stop. At the next HOA meeting, Karen tried to reclaim control. She opened with a tirade about media lies and residents undermining order. She pointed directly at me, shouting, "He's manipulating all of you." This isn't about disability, it's about rebellion. But the room wasn't hers anymore. A neighbor stood up and cut her off. "Karen, my brother uses a wheelchair. Do you know how disgusting it was to hear you call a ramp selfish on live TV? You don't speak for us anymore." Applause filled the room. Karen slammed her clipboard down, face red as fire. "You're all turning on me? After everything I've done to keep this neighborhood perfect?" Another board member, usually silent, finally spoke. "Perfect for who, Karen?" "Not for the people you've been bullying. Not for the families you've been fining over flower pots and basketball hoops. And certainly not for David." The room erupted again. Cheers, claps, shouts of "Enough!" Karen tried to shout over it, but her voice was swallowed whole. For once, she was just noise. That night, the board voted. Not only were all fines against me rescinded, but a motion was passed to remove Karen as HOA president. She stormed out before the vote was even finished, screaming threats about lawsuits, promising she'd make us all pay. But her power was gone. The following week, the HOA received official notice from HUD. Their treatment of me violated federal law. They faced fines, mandatory training, and ongoing oversight. The ramp stayed exactly where it was, and the HOA was ordered to formally apologize. I remember sitting on my porch the day the letter arrived, neighbors gathered around me, kids riding bikes on the street. My wife read the notice aloud, and when she finished, everyone cheered. Someone even strung balloons on the ramp, turning it into a symbol of victory. Karen? She vanished. Word was she moved out quietly a few weeks later, too humiliated to stay. But for me, the fight was never just about one ramp. It was about what it stood for. The right to live freely, with dignity, without being crushed by someone else's obsession with control. When I roll down that ramp today, I don't just feel independence. I feel pride that I didn't give in. Pride that my neighbors finally found their voice. Pride that one bully with a clipboard couldn't erase what's right. And if you're watching this, facing your own HOA nightmare, let this be proof. You're not powerless. You have rights. You have a voice. And sometimes, when you stand up, you'll find your whole community standing with you. So don't stay silent. Don't let anyone intimidate you into giving up what matters most. Like, subscribe, share, and tell your HOA nightmare in the comments below. Let's make sure every Karen out there knows the law is stronger than their clipboard.